Welcome everybody, my name is Stefan Kraut and I'm going to show you today a few advanced techniques on how to do some checks and some validations within PDI and how to bind a custom facet into a thing inspector of a standard business object. This is a little bit advanced, so what I will show in detail is, of course, how to create a facet with a custom BO inside, how to bind this custom BO to the facet and to the host business object. I will show how to make things visible in an onload event, and I will show you how to make things visible or invisible based on the information if the screen is displayed on an iPad or not. And I will show you how to do a check if a business user is currently doing changes to the business object or if it is a service user. Okay, let's start with a custom business object, and keep in mind this custom business object is one we want to add on a facet in a BO in a standard BO. I name it custom facet. We are not implementing now a real business reason, it is just a real business scenario. It is just to show a couple of techniques, and I haven't planned that video, so please excuse if there are some things not working, or yeah, I have to try some things. Well, if we will have a custom business object and we want to attach it to a standard business object, we need an alternative key. The alternative key is used to retrieve the business object, and the alternative key is the same ID as the host business object. Technically, it could also be a UUID. Usually we use the ID from the host BO. We will use the customer later, so this will be the customer ID. And I just name it like this. I name it customer ID. Just because I don't know which ID the customer currently has, I use just the ID. I could also use, let's check, the business partner internal ID. I think that's even more correct. Business partner internal ID. So then we don't have an issue with a cut number or cut zeros. So that's the first thing. We need to attach this facet to a business object. We can directly go into this and build in all the other validations and so on later on. Let's do this first. Still activating. Next step would be to create an embedded component for this business object. It would be an empty embedded component for now. Exactly, so okay, now I've created the embedded component. I directly open it in the UI designer. And I need to prepare this embedded component a little bit in order to make this work. The first thing I have to do is I have to bind this embedded component to my custom business object. This is usually automatically done when I just move a field to the left side to the UI model. So now I have my customer ID here, which is enough for now. I also create a structure, and I call this structure import. We will come later to it. This is just a matter of style, how to name this. I just name it the same way. And if you want to have it more structured, you can also add a new structure. name it custom facet and move the ID in here, and yeah, this will bind automatically, and so this just looks nicer. That's just the way I do it. The next step we need is, in the controller we need an import. So technically we want later on have this facet be displayed within a customer, within an account, and the account has an output providing the account ID, and we are taking this account ID and we need an import to take this account ID. So that's what we create here. I name it account ID, and I have a parameter. Okay. So this is the first difficulty that might appear. So as you see, this has switched back. If I name this one and I don't press enter, I go somewhere, and what did I do? I did rename this one and do some action like this. No. Well, it switched back. So just well, it didn't happen now, of course. Just make sure that you hit enter after entering a parameter name. And also take into account that this parameter name must be the same, exactly the same name as the output parameter in order to make this facet work on the iPad. Okay, I only named that import now. Well, it's not everything just out of brain now. So what I do now, I bind my import account ID to this import customer ID data field, and not to the bound one. So you can see bound ones with the green light, and we have the yellow light for unbound ones. I use the one in my import structure. This is important, otherwise the process would not work. So we can save this, and we will continue to this screen later. This is now enough preparation in order to bind the screen to the account. For debug purpose, we can go to the data model here in the BO browser. If you don't have the BO browser visible, you can find it here. For debug reasons, I will move those fields to my screen. So we can say this is the import customer ID, and this is the alternative key as the customer ID. If I talk of customer ID and account ID, this is basically the same. Customer is the underlying business object, account is the screen that actually shows the customer. You have seen now, once I move this one to the screen, it got renamed. You can leave it like it is, you can rename it again. The UI designer is clever enough to keep those bindings intact and do a proper refactoring here. You can also name the section group to debug and so on. Okay. Let's move on to the customer. Well, maybe you see now we don't have an XPO, so we cannot access the customer business object. We cannot access the customer screen in here. There is a trick. So one thing would be to create a new XPO and just create a dummy field in order to access the screens. The other way is, let's go into the UI designer again, to use the configuration explorer. In the configuration explorer, you can drill down to the BYD, COD, sales on demand, account, UI, It's always in the UI, so when I go to another screen, for example to contact, also in the UI, these are the actual screens. And here I want to extend the TI, which is the thing inspector, so the big screen. And I can open this here. I can enhance screens here. This will work. It will be transported and everything. The downside is I will not see this screen within PDI. That means by looking at the Solution Explorer, I do not know that this screen has been enhanced. And also in future, I have to open any other screens in order to open the UI designer and then do this navigation step and drill down to the desired screen and open it this way. Okay, let's close this pane. We have the account now opened, and just because it always leads to confusion. This is a standard screen, this one is a custom screen. The difference within the UI designer is that the custom screen, I can completely work with all the properties. I can drag and drop fields directly in here, and all this is not possible on the standard screen. So in here, if I want to change anything, if I want to go here and if I change the value, it would say me it's not possible. This is in another layer. We are working in a partner layer, or yeah, it's called partner layer. And the screen itself is modeled in a deeper layer. We cannot access this screen. The only possibility to influence this screen is the Extensibility Explorer. So you can only work in here. This is everything. You can click here in order to try to select the correct. You can see sometimes it works if you click on a pane container, it gets selected in here. You can use this. Let's see if we find that one. Here it is. This works for pane containers, sometimes also for button groups or actions. It does not always work. So it is better to know which entity to select within the Extensibility Explorer. Now my goal is I want to add a new tab on the end here. How to do that? The tab list, let's see if it's automatically selected if I click somewhere here. Well, no, it's not. You need to know that the tab list is the undefined entity in the Extensibility Explorer. And this undefined entity has an operation called add view with embedded component. And this is exactly what we want to use. We click on this, and this is the next pitfall. In the UI later on, all the tab titles are uppercase. If you write it lowercase here or camel case, you will have the tab title uppercase if it's displayed directly on the list, but you will have it as you typed it in if it goes too far to the right and is not displayed, and you have to press that little more facets button, or however that is called. So I will type it in uppercase, and now I can go down here and select my customer facet, and I can directly do a binding. Do not hit apply at first, because you can only reach this binding in this screen. If you don't do it here, you have to remove the embedded component binding later on into it and do it again. So this is the binding screen, and on the left side you can see we have a public output EC customer root, and on the right side we have our import and we have the account ID. That's now, as I said, critical. please always make sure that you have the exact same name of the output and the input, otherwise you will break iPad compatibility. So we bind this, okay, apply, and that's it for now. We are done with the customer TI. There's nothing else we can do here. Okay, here we are. We open up a customer. I hope I can find one in the system. So this is our team internal play system. So if you see any strange behavior, this could also be of other people playing around with it. Okay, finally, here we are. Now you can see that not all facets fit on here. These are the area where all the facets are displayed in capital letters. If we drill down here, if we would have not written our customer facet in capital letters, it would be lowercase in here and would look different to the standard ones. Therefore, customer facet is here. And we can see that we can't see anything. Why is this? We didn't initialize our facet. And that's the next part now. So we have our import, and the import gets filled with the customer ID, but nothing else happens. So we need to do something. We have to go to the properties again. And we have one button here, one property here, request fire on initialization. We set this to true, and this will lead the import to fire an event once it gets initialized. There is another event, request auto fire. This will cause the import to fire this action also when the value gets changed later on. We don't need that for now, but we need an on fire event. We can create a new event handler directly here in this area. It is the same as creating an event handler here and then selecting it here. We do it that way, and we name it read or create. And here we have a couple of ways on how to do this read or create. There is an old-fashioned way where we try to read. We can do this with a BO operation. We can read, and then we had some Ruby script, and the Ruby script then checked if the ID was initial and fired the create if the ID is initial. This is also not iPad compatible. There are a couple of workarounds to make this work in the iPad. I shall show you now a very nice way, and this is using the condition in the condition operation in the event handler. So at first we read, and here you can see we read instance of our customer facet, and we need to tell the system read with what. With what is explained relatively easy. We want to read with an alternative key. We want to use the customer ID we get from the import, and we want to read with the customer ID from our business object. So this one is bound against the alternative key. If we go to the data model, you can see this one was the customer ID we defined in here, and this is our alternative key, and therefore we can read with it. Okay, let's go back to the controller. The parameter name is completely irrelevant. We can name it Hugo, it's completely okay. What would we expect afterwards? If this read was successful, then we found an instance that got created prior to this situation, and then the customer facet customer ID is filled. Yeah, that means we use the import, we read a business object with that ID. If we found that business object, it gets initialized, or yeah, it gets read, and the customer ID is filled. So what we do now, we place a condition here, and we check if the customer ID is really filled, or to be precise, we check if the customer ID is empty. And maybe I was a little bit fast. So that's the situation when you add a condition. At first you have to select expression, because then you can bind a data field to it. And now we can add an operation here which is which compares against the expression. And this one we can leave it empty, because we want to check, we want to make this true when this is empty. Okay, so this would be true now if instance 1, 2, 3 got selected. But we want to check if no instance got selected, and we have this if we do not fill anything here. You can't select anything here, you can't, yeah. Okay, and what should we do when this one is empty? At first we select this line and then the configure operation button, and now a new operations window pops up, and we can place our create action in here. And what we do now is we create an instance with a BO operation, and afterwards we, that way around, first the BO operation, then the data operation, and afterwards we assign the ID we got from the account filled into the import. We fill this ID into the customer facet ID, and then we have the alternative key filled in our newly created instance, and the next save will work. And when you go into the same account again and you navigate to our customer facet again, this one will be read, so the read will be successful, and therefore we can now store and persist data and read it again. Okay, I forgot one thing. I already hit save and activate, but I forgot one thing. We need to tell the import to fire this action. This is now available here. We selected the import, the properties, the on fire event, fire initialization is true. So this should work now. Save and activate. Let's try what happens on the UI. This is a scary name. So we move now to the custom facet. The system will detect that something has changed. It will jump back to overview, and we have to navigate again. Exactly. Here we are. Maybe you noticed the import was filled a little bit faster, and then the alternative key got saved. And if we save this now, unfortunately we don't have any more fields here, but now this is probably bound, and you can use this technique whenever you need to bind a custom facet to a standard business object, and you want to have any advantages you usually only have in a custom business object. And we now come to the fields we want to place here under certain conditions. So let's go back to our business object. Let's get rid of this. So in our business object now we create a couple of fields. We'll have a field which should only be set to visible for prospects. And we make this an indicator. And we want to have a field which is only visible for accounts. So where the prospect flag is not set. For example, we make this kind of a long text. And we want to have a field which can, we will create a mandatory field which should be checked only for users, but should allow a save for service user. Let's make all three indicators, so that's easy then. Okay. So, now in order to check if we have prospects, I mean, especially for the prospects flag, because this is already a flag, it would be possible to work also with UI only conditions and so on. But I want to show you how to make this work with even more complicated in a more complicated scenario. For example, you want to check multiple conditions, or you want to check if a certain user is logged on, or for a certain language, or all that. So for this we can use the after loading event, and for later on we also need the onSave validation to check this must be set from UI. Okay, let's make this a little bit more complicated. I forgot one. We want this visible for only for iPad. Let's make it like this. And we say this is visible. Yeah, only for prospects. Okay, that's fine. So at first we bring these fields onto the UI. Okay, we need to reload that. Yeah, when you change something on a business object, it's always a good idea to reload the UI designer. If it's a big business object with associations and all that, UI designer might have issues. If it's a simple one, you can also do the metadata update. It doesn't hurt. If it's a complicated one, it could end up in renaming list tables and so on. Yeah, if you have a complex business object where you don't see in a quick check or the first site what changes, and you don't do massive business object changes, I would yeah, not advise to do many metadata updates. Okay, so I put now this on here. That's the right case, right? So this is visible on iPad. This should be visible for prospects. And okay, so these are the three fields. Currently, all the fields are visible, all the fields are not controlled from a UI perspective. Let's see what we have. In order to make a field visible, we have a visibility property, and we can set this to advanced. And advanced allows us to bind it to a data model field, which is of a Boolean type or of an indicator type, and based on this field being true or false, visibility attribute is true or false. So let's start with the iPad. This can be done in the UI relatively easy. What we know from the iPad does not support any Ruby script. So it's easy for us. We can at first sort our object model a little bit. We name it tag fields, and we will have indicator is iPad. Now we say it's tablet mode, and we have desktop mode. I always use both. Theoretically, you can only survive with one, but some of the attributes you want to have true when it's in iPad mode. Some you want to have in false when it's in iPad mode. So I usually use both. And the trick here is, at first I need indicators. Oh, wait. Indicator, yes please, of type Boolean, both of them. Indicator here. And I set them per default to iPad mode. So tablet mode has initial value true, and desktop mode has initial value false. This means I'm resetting these fields for the desktop mode using Ruby script. The Ruby script will not be executed on the iPad, and therefore the iPad will see the default. However, the desktop will see the values after the Ruby script has been run, and so each device will see the correct fields. How do I do where do I place my Ruby script? we know the input is triggered and my read or create is triggered, and I can just place my script below this. You have a nice code completion here, and all I do is I say desktop mode is true, tech field, and tablet mode is false. That's everything. This will only be executed on the desktop, and therefore on the desktop mode is true, tablet mode is false, and on the iPad it will fall back to the initial values, and on the iPad desktop mode is false, tablet mode is true. So we have exactly what we want. And what we can do now, can go back to the designer and can say here visibility should now be bound against tablet mode. We remember tablet mode is true on the iPad, and now this will only be visible on the iPad. Unfortunately, I cannot show you now how it looks on the iPad, but we can reload the facet at one of our customers here, and you will see that it's not visible. We changed it, so we're coming back. So as you see, it was here very short and it got deactivated because this is no iPad. Okay, so the next one, visible only for prospects. We need a little bit different approach here. Of course, we could do that also with Ruby script, but as I said, we want also to have a possibility of doing more complex stuff. For this, I will create a new element, and we use the keyword or the annotation transient. What I'm creating here is a field which is transient, therefore it is not persisted, and transient field have a special behavior as they are the only fields I can write to in the after loading event. This means in this after loading event now I can place logic and look if the customer is a prospect or not, and yeah, I can basically access this. Now I could do a query on the customer, I can do a retrieve on the customer, I have the customer ID as alternative key, but I don't want to do that all the time, and therefore I'm creating association to the customer, and I would advise this to you whenever you need permanent access on every launch of the facet, on every initialization, and the customer is not changing that much, or the target object is not changing often. Create an association. Well, we can do it that easy, just having association to customer, and we can set this in an after modify as well as on a before save. I'm setting this in the after modify, or maybe in both. don't forget to activate your business object before trying to use it. Okay, I'm just thinking about if this might be not work because the after loading is executed before the first after modify. Therefore, we most likely have to do the retrieve approach. Okay, we can try that later. Let's do a retrieve here. So we can import the business partner. As I said, this is live development, what you're seeing here. So I will retrieve the customer actually, and I can retrieve the customer with this customer ID. Of course, I should only do this if a customer ID is available. Okay, anything missing? Nothing is missing. Good. We can also do it the other way around. If a customer ID is initial, we should not do anything in here. So go away. I'm usually trying to avoid the deep nestings of if. Makes more sense like that. Okay, and now I can say if so where's the prospect? Is it in here? The prospect indicator. If the prospect indicator is true. What was our condition? It should only be visible for prospects. Okay. There we are. Then we set our isProspect to true. As you can see here, we cannot write to all the other objects. We can only write to the isProjects element because this is transient. Okay, so in this case, it's a very dumb example, but you could do in here all sort of checks, like what language does my user have? Is my user or is my document in a certain state or whatever status. I hope my document is not traveling around the world. Token missing. What did I do here? That's what I want. Okay, so always check if instances are set. Still not happy? Yeah, it is. Okay, it's late here. Please excuse. Good. Now we have the after loading event. And this means when I go to the facet here again. Okay, I have done business object changes. I added this transient field, so I reopened the embedded component. And now I can see my transient field in the BO browser. In order to use it, I need to do some manual work, because when I go here and say, okay, I want this to be visible only for prospects, and I go to the visible attribute, can select binding, but I cannot see my field here. Why can't I see my field? It is only the data model available, and my field is in the business object model. Also something you should know, if you add a field here from the business object browser, it will automatically be taken over in the data model, but it will usually end up on the root node. So when you want to have a structured data model, you can do that, but you should afterwards go to the data model and move it to a certain point. And beware of doing a lot of refactoring after you have used those fields in a lot of operations. There are some operations like Ruby script, like assign, and a few others, where the fields are not automatically updated if you move them inside the data model. But for this case, I have now to move my isProspects to the left side into my data model, and now I can access it here from the properties. And finally, I can make my prospects visible when my isProspect field is set to visible, and this is the case after my afterloading code is run, and therefore there is no save required to change that. It's now a little bit difficult to show you. Okay, now we have a non-prospect business object. It will definitely reload the facet. But if my code works, we should see the field disappear here. As you can see, I didn't save and the field disappeared. Let's see if we can find the prospect. I think we had one before. There's also an account. This is a prospect. And we go here, visible for prospects. So this is the trick with the after loading. And as said in the beginning, after loading is only available for custom business object. And this is the reason why it makes sense to use a custom business object. Before we go to the validation on save, I have noticed something that might be annoying and got escalated at a lot of customers. Because if I navigate here to my custom facet, you can see that the save and cancel pops up directly. This is often not a problem, but sometimes, especially when you have the whole screen read only and you do only display things. For example, you do a web service call and you want only display some data here. Then this is very annoying. And you can avoid this by setting the work protect attribute accordingly. If you go to the data model, you can have work protect relevant attributes on every data field. And this basically means if the isProspect gets changed and work protect relevant is true, then the save cancel pops up. And if I go to the designer and on top level, so when you're somewhere in here, you go to the last one, the embedded component itself. It also has a work protect relevant, but it's not filled. And you can go in there, you can change the fallback value to Boolean select false. And once you do that, the embedded component will not force this save cancel, or will not bring up this save cancel. I can show you. Yeah, so as you have seen, I was too fast, sorry. I'm navigating to the custom facet. The save cancel is not coming up, but once I set a field which has the work protect relevant, the save and cancel pops up. It's quite nice. And you can also see the stuff gets saved. I can come back again. Was this the right account? So, and it got saved. It's working. Okay, last topic for today. I have my third element in here. Must set from UI. This is also a pretty common situation that I have some validations I want to do for the user, but the web service, for example, should be allowed to save a document even in an inconsistent state. And I show you now how this works. So usually to prevent a field from being saved, we can say if this must be set from UI. Oh, this is very speaking actually. Return false. Return false. So now I'm not able to save. Wait, is as an indicator. Good. So now I'm not able to save this from a UI when this is not checked. So far so good. How do I find out if I'm in a technical user and if I should be allowed to save this? When I want to enable the XML channel to do such changes. At first, I need to access my own identity. I need to find the UUID. I need to search for a business partner or an employee. And if the employee is not available, or actually I think it's also sufficient if you check for the business partner ID if this is not available, then fine will not work. Yeah, because a technical user has no employee or business partner assigned. It has a business partner but no employee. I think that's that way. So we start with the identity. This is, I think it's PC, here, identity management. And that way we should be able to point. Did I write it correct? Here we are. Context get current identity UUID. There it is. So that way we got the identity. It's relatively unlikely, this is a function, this is relatively unlikely that the identity cannot be retrieved. So yeah, you can check on that. So for speed reasons, I don't do that now. And I will check the employee. Nah, it should be easier. Wait, I will do it like this. If identity so, and if the identity has a business partner UUID, then allow save. I think this should work. In order to be more safe, you could also check if an employee is available. I usually use this way I'm showing you now, but I got the information from a colleague that it should work with that shortened way also. So if employee is not set, so this one will also work for service agents. The approach before would only work for technical users, and this one would also allow service agents to save the document as there are no technical employee. So, and that way you can allow or you can react in a validation on save for a certain user or not. I think I'm a service agent in this system. This is saved. Let's check. So can I save? I can't save. Now I can save. I'm a PDI user, and my user is really an employee. Ah, indeed. Okay. Okay, anyway. Well, then just trust me. So that way you can find out if it's a technical user or not. And yeah, so, and just to recap what we did today, we had a custom business object. We created an embedded component. We bound the custom business object to the embedded component. We added the embedded component using the UI designer and the configuration explorer to the account. We added some fields. We made one field visible only for the iPad. We made one field only visible for prospects. We made a third field only visible, only mandatory for real users but not service users. And we created the initialization of the embedded component in an iPad compatible way by taking care of naming the parameters in a correct way and by using the condition over a Ruby script. But on the same page we are using Ruby script to detect if we are on an iPad or not. So that's what we learned now in this little session. I hope this helps you a lot. If you have questions on that, don't hesitate to email me. My name is Stefan Kraut. Bye bye and see you soon.